Is Home Depot earnings trying to tell us something, maybe signal the start of an economic slowdown? We usually cover really broad topics here, how interest rates affect foreign exchange, affect stocks and commodities and everything else. And today I want to put the magnifying glass on Home Depot's earnings and then start to widen out to commodities and foreign exchange in the stock market at large, the economy at large, to see if this seemingly normal event, Home Depot earnings comes out obviously 4 times a year, is really signaling a broader trend in the marketplace, because I couldn't help but correlate the Home Depot earnings, the worst that we've seen for Home Depot since 2002, the biggest revenue miss that they've had in over 20 years. I couldn't help but correlate that to commodity prices also trending lower. And you might say, oh, well, this is all synergetic in the way that copper and lumber and these different prices are moving lower. And so prices at Home Depot are moving lower as well. And so they're getting less revenue. But that shouldn't be the case. In fact, prices moving lower for some of these commodities should maybe spur greater demand and greater revenue from Home Depot, as they have to pay less for those commodities and don't necessarily have to offload all of those savings in prices that they would have paid for lumber today versus a year ago when they were much higher to their customer necessarily. And so I think that this is more of a trending together between commodity prices and an industrial stock like Home Depot. And then, of course, the Dow Jones also down today, and Home Depot is more than 5% of the Dow Jones stock index. And we're really starting to see, like I say, some trends build up in here that is making me question whether or not this worst earnings from Home Depot in 20 years is a one-off event and they'll be fine. And Lowe's will report earnings next week, and Lowe's will be more optimistic, and the market will move back to essentially unchanged from yesterday to a week from now when Lowe's reports earnings. But if that's not the case, and we've seen the trending lower in price, this isn't a new thing necessarily for a Home Depot stock that peaked in 2022, crude oil, energy commodity that peaked in 2022, and copper as well, and wheat, agriculture market as well, and lumber prices as well. Definitely seems like we're putting together a more widespread story here. And then we move beyond the single stock space in Home Depot, the commodity space with your more industrial commodities like copper and crude oil and even silver, seeing some bearish action as well, kind of between precious metal and industrial metal. Agriculture markets, though they're not necessarily industrial in terms of building a house or any type of construction there, but those commodities also trending lower as well. Commodity currencies have been part of this story too. You're seeing Canadian dollar really having a tough time holding any kind of uptick. Same with Australian dollar. And this Australian dollar we've seen bounce back to 68 cents against USD, 70 cents USD, and just not be able to see anything sustained here. And again, this to me, these different parts of the economy outside of just your Home Depot earnings that reported today, your commodities that are all moving lower here today as well, and these currencies against the US dollar, Canadian dollar obviously very closely tied to crude oil. That is the commodity, that commodity currency is usually dictated by Australian dollar, closer to your metals like copper and silver and gold there. But it's not just the commodity currencies we've seen US dollar actually pick up against euro, pound, a lot of the different other major currencies that aren't necessarily tied to commodities or industrial stocks or what have you here. And this could be a one-off event. This could be, Home Depot reported bad earnings. Commodities are just normalizing in price, and they're going to catch themselves right around here. And the Dow Jones is off a little bit, but it's not necessarily falling into a downward trend to the likes of what we saw in the fall of 2022 here. Or we are returning to what we saw in the height of inflation fear of 2022, but now what might be economic slowdown type of fear. And if you are looking at, buying the dip in a Home Depot, buying the dip in Dow Jones here today, or buying the dip in some of these commodities, US dollar seems to be a pretty natural hedge against those. As you can see here, I have the Dow Jones pitted against USD, and they're pretty close mirror images of each other. So if you're buying some of those industrial commodities, or you're buying some of those commodity currencies, or you're buying Home Depot even, it seems like maybe like, oh man, I'm going to, either sell a put or buy the dip in Home Depot here off of the earnings, because I do think this is a one-off event. You're going to tell me to buy US dollar? I mean, the correlations have been there historically. The US dollar has been one of the most tried and true flight to quality assets here throughout last year's industrial fear, or sorry, not industrial, inflation fear, and now this year's more industrial fear or economic slowdown fear. You're seeing this US dollar catch a bid as well. And you used to think that, I can go to gold for flight to quality. We've seen gold rally with inflation and then rally as inflation falls. And you're seeing now gold actually falling with stocks. In my mind, the correlation isn't so much there if I'm buying stocks or commodities here on the dip as much as US dollar. Same goes for bonds as well, because, that's a little bit of a hairy subject too. We're not seeing the treasury market, the bond market rally as the stock market is coming off here, as interest rates are a little more nuanced than usual. Usually you'd see stocks moving lower, bond prices moving higher, and interest rates moving lower as well. Not the case with the nuance of still relatively high inflation and the Fed saying that they're going to keep interest rates higher for at least the short to medium term. And so this US dollar might be the best hedge against an economic slowdown here if the Home Depot earnings and some of these other trends are telling us that economic recession or slowdown is coming.